Welcome, everyone, to Day 8 of the Democrat shutdown. As is our custom now, we'll come out every morning and give you an update on where things stand. I've tried to make this as simple as possible and as digestible as possible. It seems complicated, what's happening in Washington right now. It actually is very simple. Don't let the Democrats distract you and try to convince you of things that are not true. Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, Monday, I laid out 6 simple truths about how the Democrats shut down the government, why they did it, and why it is so important for them to come to their senses and turn the lights on. Yesterday, I went through 5 fast facts for you about the shutdown, and I explained, as everyone now knows, Chuck Schumer's desperate attempts to rehabilitate his own image by shutting down the government. Today, we're going to talk about some of the consequences of that shutdown and what it means to real people around this country, real Americans experiencing the devastating cost of their political antics here. And I'm going to read you some sample quotes and headlines that we just collected yesterday from around the country. Here's a headline from The Hill. GOP leaders point to Capitol Police missed paychecks as shutdown drags on. So today, the U.S. Capitol Police officers are going to come to work to bravely protect U.S. government officials and staff in these dangerous times. They're going to do that without pay. Many Democrats in this chamber, by the way, I want to note, are going to receive paychecks this month while the men and women of the U.S. Capitol Police who are protecting them will not. Here's another headline from the New York Post. Aviation groups warn a government shutdown will delay aircraft safety inspections, maintenance work on critical equipment. While air traffic controllers are going to continue to serve in their posts, thankfully, critical safety inspections are going to stop, increasing risk for air travelers. That affects everybody. Here's another headline from Georgia, local media in Georgia. Central Georgia food banks prepare for surge of new clients during the government shutdown. It's a sad headline. Remember, Georgia's 2 Democrat senators, Warnock and Ossoff, have now voted 5 times to keep the government closed down. 5 times so far. I suspect they may continue, and they're hurting real people in the state of Georgia. Here's one from New Hampshire local media. National parks caught in the crosshairs of government shutdown. Let me point out that both senators from New Hampshire, Senators Shaheen and Hassan, have repeatedly voted to keep the government closed, and New Hampshire's national park sites closed by extension. How about New Jersey? Here's a headline yesterday. Hospital at-home telehealth programs on hold amid government shutdown. You got 2 Democrat senators in New Jersey, Andy Kim and Cory Booker, and they have repeatedly voted against funding these programs, which New Jerseyans rely upon daily. Here's one from Michigan. Michigan nonprofit leaders said a shutdown would be at best disruptive and at worst potentially devastating for local communities. There are 2 Democrat senators in Michigan, Gary Peters and Alyssa Slotkin, and they have voted now 5 times to enable this devastation upon their communities. One more, I could do this all day. Here's one more from CBS News. Government shutdown fears have Colorado food banks bracing for potential new visitors. You guessed it. 2 Democrat senators from Colorado, Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, they keep voting over and over to keep the government closed. Democrats claim they want to negotiate, but that is already happening in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion. And we brought in the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee this morning, Tom Cole, who can talk more about that. But I just want to say this as I yield to Mr. Cole, and then you'll hear from the rest of the leaders, and I'll take some questions. There is one sad and inescapable fact that no one can forget here. This shutdown is nothing more than political cover for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. They are worried about the Marxist flanked in their Democrat Party. The Marxists are about to elect a mayor in New York City. That's Chuck Schumer's state, and he's terrified that he's going to get a challenge from his far left. I've noted that Chuck Schumer is a very far-left politician, but he's not far enough left for the communists, and they're coming for him. And so he has to put up his dukes and show a fight. So they picked a fight on something that's not even related at all to the shutdown and the funding that we should have gotten done by the end of September. We just need a stopgap measure to give us a little more time to get the job of Congress done. They refuse to do it because they're playing politics, and real Americans are paying the price for it.
I mean, we've had a pretty decent year in the House Appropriations Committee, all 12 bills out of committee before September 30th. 3 that we are in negotiations on with the Democrats. Those negotiations have gone very well. We're prepared pretty quickly to close once the government's reopened. We could get at least 3 bills done. The president could sign them in. Those things would be immune from a shutdown until the following September 30th. Then we'd pick another group of 3 or 4 bills, and then we would do in cooperation with our Democratic colleagues and start working on that. So the process, honestly, was moving along pretty well, and then we had unrelated demands, obviously related to repealing work the Congress had already done on Medicaid, and then these new discussions on subsidies. And I do want to point out, at least the bill we have right now in front of us doesn't even go till December 31st. I mean, these actions would still, we could do this work and still have time to turn around, as the president and our leadership has pointed out in both chambers, and sit down and talk about these other issues. But it's hard to do much when the negotiations aren't happening simply because the government is shut down. So again, we're prepared to work. I've got very talented counterparts on the Democratic side. They're good negotiators. We've negotiated a lot of labor issue bills together between Patty Murray, Rosa DeLore, and myself, and obviously Susan Collins is one of the best legislators in the building. So it's not like we were going to have a hard time, I think, finding common ground, but you do have to restore the government for that to happen. Democrats are not likely to move bills while they've got the government shut down, because it suggests that absent that, we would be moving through the process as normal, and frankly, in a much better shape than we've been in recent years. So again, I'm just hopeful that my colleagues in the Senate, and it's worth pointing out, a majority of the Senate's already on our side, a bipartisan majority of 55. So this really does get down to Leader Schumer and the bulk of his caucus just simply shutting down the government over items unrelated to what we normally do in appropriation. I've mentioned this to both the Speaker and the Leader because they make these decisions, but you know, we should not be handling Medicaid on my committee. We should not be handling the Obamacare subsidies simply because we don't have the expertise or the jurisdiction to do either one of those things. What we can do is move the bills through the process and make sure that every soldier is paid, make sure that every air traffic controller is paid, make sure that the American people don't lose any services. So we're prepared to do that. Frankly, I think my Democratic colleagues are prepared to do that once we resolve this shutdown, and that's quite simply in the hands of Leader Schumer and the bulk of his caucus. When they make the mind that they want the government up and running, believe me, we'll move very quickly, and we'll try to move away quickly from a CR status to passing bills individually or in small groups, and get folks up and working again, and get the government restored and continue that process as we're supposed to do.
Well, appreciate the work that Chairman Cole and the Appropriations Committee have done months and months ago to get us in a place where we would be ready to have all of the appropriations in a place where you can negotiate those differences. It was Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries who chose to take their toys and go home, all to appease the most radical elements of the far left, because Chuck Schumer is more concerned about his political job than he is about the jobs of millions of American families. American families' lives are at stake here. Whether or not we're going to be able to pay our troops, whether or not people can get on an airplane and go visit a relative or take a vacation, whatever their plans may have been, are being disrupted. Real lives of real people are being disrupted so that Chuck Schumer can show the far left Marxist in his party that he's having some kind of tantrum and fighting Donald Trump because he's afraid of the far left part of his political base. A lot of people say, what is this really about? And obviously you see Democrats trying to make it about things that have nothing to do with the basic funding of government, the bill that we passed here in this House just a few weeks ago. And in fact, a lot of Democrats are having buyer's remorse, but every one of us has a voting card. And weeks ago, Republicans and Democrats in the House had an opportunity to put this voting card in the machine and tell the American people where they stand on a government shutdown. And 99% of House Republicans voted yes to keep the government open while we negotiate our differences. and 99% of Democrats voted no to shut the government down. Some of them are having buyer's remorse, and I don't blame them. They're now realizing the dire consequences that their no vote caused to real families across America. Some of them are begging the speaker, please bring us back in so they can get another shot at this. You don't get a do-over. They picked the wrong side. They voted to shut the government down. They failed the test. But the good news is they can get bailed out by the Senate. If they really want to solve these problems, if they really want to make sure our troops get paid, which, by the way, we voted for, they voted against, they can call their 2 Democrat senators who have 5 times voted to shut the government down and say, today's the day you can make amends. Today's the day you can open the government up. We only need 4 more votes. It's not a large number. 4 Democrat senators have come to their senses and said, yes, let's open up the government and not have this charade continue, but it takes 4 more because Chuck Schumer wants to have a tantrum. Let me tell you what another senator just said yesterday about why this shutdown is going on. He said, quote, this is a Democrat senator yesterday, the point of this shutdown is not just suffering for suffering's sake, but to make a point. So you even have Democrat senators admitting that they're imposing suffering on the American people, but they just want to make a point? My God, millions of lives are at stake. They know they're inflicting suffering on the American people so they can make some kind of point. If you want to have a tantrum, this is not the 3rd grade. This is the lives of American people. Real lives are at stake. Real careers and families. Will they be able to pay their house note come the 15th? That's at stake. The safety of our air traffic control system. So that some senator that wants to have a tantrum can make a point? I think the American people are getting sick of this charade that's going on. They know what the Democrats in the House did to shut the government down. But they also know that just 4 senators doing the right thing can turn this around and open the government back up again. And yes, we have big differences on a lot of things that we need to be negotiating on. All those bills that Chairman Cole and his appropriators sent out of committee, you can't have those negotiations while you're in a shutdown. And they know that. But they don't mind inflicting suffering on the American people because they want to make a point. I think the American people are going to start making points. People could pick up the phone and call their Democrat senator. We did a press call yesterday in the states of Georgia and Maryland, where all 4 senators there could literally end this today, but they've all been 5 times voting no on the bill to get the government back open. It was ironic. The Maryland delegation of Democrats held a press conference just days ago talking about how bad a shutdown will be for the state of Maryland. And they're right. The irony is they're the ones who voted to shut it down. Over 150 employees in the state of Maryland alone will be hurt, and their own Democrat delegation is saying how bad it's going to be, yet they're the ones who voted to inflict that, quote, suffering on the people of Maryland. This madness can end. This madness needs to end with sanity finally emerging. Bring some common sense in. And Chuck Schumer, if you can't do the right thing because you're so afraid of your political job, think about the jobs of millions of families out there who don't want to have that suffering inflicted on them. And let 4 other of your Senate Democrat colleagues do the right thing for you. Let's end this.
8 days. We are now 8 days into the Democrats' shutdown. 8 days that our troops are not getting paid. Border Patrol agents are going without mission-critical funding. Federal workers are being forced to figure out how they're going to put food on the table for their families. All because Democrats would rather hold the American people hostage to appease their radical base than to pass our clean, nonpartisan government funding bill. As of this morning, Senate Democrats have had 5 opportunities to get the government up and running again for the people they were elected to serve. And the vast majority of them have voted no every single time. Their obstruction is not only a slap in the face to hardworking Americans whose livelihoods are being put at risk due to the Democrats' shutdown, It's also a slap in the face to the constituents who fund their salaries with the expectation that they fulfill their basic constitutional responsibilities. In my hand, I have more than a dozen pages of organizations from across the country representing Americans from every end of the political spectrum, echoing the exact same message. And that message is that government shutdowns solves nothing and hurts everyone. So to our Democrat colleagues in the Senate, enough with the political grandstanding. Do the right and responsible thing by passing the House's clean CR immediately. Americans are already hurting. People's jobs are at stake. You can and must end the political games and reopen the government today.
Again and again, Democrats have chosen to put illegal aliens over hardworking Americans. That is not my opinion. That is fact. Read the bill. Democrats let millions of illegals pour in across our border under Joe Biden. Democrats gave them driver's license. Democrats allowed them to cast ballots in elections. And now Democrats are fighting, they are fighting to give illegals health care on your dime. Democrats want to take money out of your pockets and give them to illegal aliens so they can get government benefits. These aren't my opinions. These are actual facts. Go to the website and read the facts, right? But what Democrats do when they have no plan, no vision, and no leader, they have to misrepresent the truth. And they do that over and over again. And they think you, the American people, aren't going to notice. They're not going to notice. You're not going to notice that they're taking money out of your pockets and giving them to illegals. They're going to try and put their spin on it. But I challenge you, go to the website and read it for yourself. When Democrats have the choice between standing up for American people or catering to the illegal aliens, what do? They choose illegals every single time and time again. And that's exactly what they're doing again in this government shutdown fight. Democrats are putting illegals above American citizens. So I ask the Democrats, how long will it take you to put Americans first in this funding fight? I ask our senators, Senator Peters and Slotkin, when are you going to put the American people first? The people that elected you to represent them. How many times will you vote against our troops? I ask Senator Peters and Senator Slotkin, how many times are you going to vote not to pay our troops? How many times will you vote against moms and babies who rely on WIC? Against flood insurance? How many times will you vote to put illegals first and Americans last? The answer to that question is as long as the radical base keeps calling the shots. My two senators are pandering to their radical base as well. Republicans, however, are actually putting Americans first every single day. And why? Because that's our job. That's our duty. And quite frankly, that is our responsibility. And I call on the Democrats, especially the two Democrats from my state, Senator Peters and Senator Slotkins, please put the American people who you represent first.
We're on day 8 of the Republican health care crisis, a crisis that has been visited upon the American people for months and is causing great devastation to working class America, rural America, suburban America, small town America, the heartland of America, urban America, and black and brown communities all throughout America. House Democrats are here at the Capitol on duty and ready to reopen the government and enact a spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people, while at the same time addresses the Republican health care crisis that is devastating the American people and is causing premiums, copays, and deductibles to go up for tens of millions of Americans because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. We're asking everyday Americans from all across the country to share your story about the premium increases that you are experiencing with your member of Congress, with your United States Senator, and certainly with any of us. If you've received a letter, or when you receive a letter in the next few weeks, we want you to reach out to us and share that letter with us. You can do it at democraticleader.house.gov/share your story. That's democraticleader.house.gov/share your story. We are fighting for you. We know that because of the Republican health care crisis and their refusal to address the Affordable Care Act tax credits that are on the brink of expiring, that millions of Americans are about to see their health care costs double, triple, or quadruple. And when you get that letter in the mail, share it with us. You can share it with us, as I indicated, and you can include a hashtag, my premium went up. My premium went up. And it's going up because of the continued Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leader. We are so grateful for your leadership and your vision at this point of healthcare crisis, and I'm proud to be here with these representatives in leadership of our caucus. Here's the terrible thing about the position that the Republicans have backed themselves into with healthcare. It hurts everyone. And this isn't about red states or blue states. These premium hikes, these cuts, are going to make healthcare more expensive and harder to obtain for every American. We had a hearing today in the Capitol, and we were joined by a 29-year-old woman, Mariah Plant from West Virginia. And she told us about her family's struggle. She is the full-time caretaker for her brother, Matt, who suffers a lot of disabilities and needs to be home and be on Medicaid. And without that support, she doesn't know how she would be able to provide for her brother. She also runs a small business and receives a tax credit so that she can afford health insurance under the ACA. So she is looking at potentially a cut to Medicaid that jeopardizes her ability to care for her loved one and her family, and in the immediate future, a steep rise in premiums and no ability for her to make that up. Her budget simply doesn't stretch that far. Like most Americans, she doesn't have that extra hundreds of dollars lying around a month to be able to afford health care. And that was the story from West Virginia. And as I look in my district, as premium notices are coming out, a couple in Massachusetts that makes $88,000 a year is looking at having their premium doubled. If we go to Speaker Johnson's hometown of Benton, Louisiana, that same couple making $88,000 will see a tripling of their premium, 3 times. That could be around $23,000 a year for that couple to pay. People can't afford that. 60% of families in this country cannot meet the basics, cannot afford the basics for their family. And these sort of dramatic jumps in premiums are what is going to pull them under. So here we are, and we implore the Republican Party, go talk to your neighbors and hear their anxieties about what's happening to their health care, what's happening in your shutdown you're imposing on them, and get on a plane and come back to Washington and get to work in reopening this government and protecting health care and the American worker.
Thank you, Whip Clark, and thank you, Leader Jeffries, for convening us here, for your strength in asking House Democrats to be here, to be present, to be here at work. This is day 8 of the Republican-led shutdown. It's the second week that House Republicans have refused to call us back to the House, the last session day being, I believe, September 19th. Rather than tackling the most pressing issues facing our nation, including the rising costs of health care, Republicans are running from their responsibilities. By failing to negotiate with Democrats to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, Republicans are guaranteeing that they are exacerbating this health care crisis. Take, for example, Iowa's 1st Congressional District, represented by Congresswoman Marianna Miller-Meeks. This, by the way, is the same member who said she'll hold town halls when hell freezes over just this week. A 60-year-old couple earning $82,000 a year will see their annual premiums rise by 200%, $13,000 a year. For another example, Republican Congressman Gabe Evans, Colorado District, a family of 4 earning just $64,000 a year, will see their premiums increase 195%, or $2,500 a year. Think about that. Americans are already struggling with the affordability crisis, and they are being jammed with this health care crisis, all at the hands of Speaker Johnson and his Republican colleagues. And they're lying, claiming that they're the ones working around the clock to fix this health care, to help fix health care. If that's true, where are they? Where are they? Well, Democrats are here trying to solve this crisis that they created with their big, ugly bill. The American people are smart enough to know that who is responsible for their health care costs going up. I hope that Republicans will wake up, that they'll do the right thing, and that they'll work with us to keep health care costs down.
We are now in day 8 of a government shutdown, and which is truly unfortunate and unnecessary, and totally at the behest of left-wing Democrat special interest groups who have pressured the Democrat leadership into a position that makes absolutely no sense to any thinking person. I want you to think about where we are. Think about this scenario. You have a bill passed by the House of Representatives over here in the Senate, 24 pages long, clean, short-term, nonpartisan, no policy writers, no Republican priorities, a clean resolution to fund the government, which there are 55 senators, 55 out of 100 senators are voting for the clean, short-term funding resolution that would open up the government. The President of the United States has said that as soon as it is passed in the Senate, he will sign it into law. So what you have is complete, unified support for a short-term funding resolution to keep the government open and make sure that all the government employees who are currently being impacted and their families can get back to work and get paid again. And so it's always interesting when the Democrat leader comes down here and describes this fantasy world where the bill that they proposed, which would only get 47 votes here in the United States Senate, not even 50, not 51, not a majority, and certainly not the 60 that are necessary to pass consequential legislation in the Senate, it wouldn't get a single vote in the House of Representatives. So they've got a bill, a proposal, that they say keeps the government open, that can't pass the Senate, wouldn't pass the House, and wouldn't be signed into law by the President. You tell me who is responsible for the government shutdown. Republicans passed a bill in the House, over here in the Senate, 24 pages long, sitting right at the desk. We can pick it up and pass it today, send it to the President, who will sign it into law. The government opens up again. Or you can take this proposal the Democrats have, which has a $1.5 trillion in new spending, allows for free health care coverage for non-citizens, completely obliterates the $50 billion rural hospital fund that we put in place to support rural hospitals in this country who are struggling. And they think that would pass, doesn't pass here, doesn't pass the House, wouldn't get signed into law of the President. So just a logical person, think about this. Think about the juxtaposition of those two positions, and you tell me who is shutting the government down. We have a straightforward, simple proposition. A 24-page funding resolution to keep the government open with no partisan policy riders, no gimmicks, short-term, funds the government through November the 21st to give us an opportunity to continue to do the government funding the way we should do it through the appropriations process, where we have the committees meeting and Republicans and Democrats contributing, and then bring it to the floor and have an open amendment process here. That's the way the government should normally be funded. And so what this does is provides a short-term extension in order for all that to happen. That's all that we're talking about. Now, they have other issues they want to bring up, which I've said before, we're happy to discuss. And yes, there are some things that I think there is interest on both sides in trying to address when it comes to health care in this country. But you can't take the federal government hostage and expect to have a reasonable conversation on those issues. The government needs to be funded. Federal employees need to go back to work. Federal agencies and departments need to be open and providing the services that the American people expect. It's that simple. And that's really what this is all about. Again, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. It's whether or not they want to support a 24-page funding resolution that keeps the government open or continue to vote for $1.5 trillion in new spending, free health care for non-citizens, and completely wiping out a $50 billion rural hospital fund that's designed to support rural hospitals in this country. Something that would get 47 votes here in the Senate and not a majority in the House of Representatives, wouldn't get a single vote, honestly, among Republicans in the House of Representatives, and would not be signed into law by the President, versus something, again, passed by the House, here at the Senate. All we need is 5 more votes. There are a majority of United States senators today who support the short-term funding resolution. 55 out of 100. We need 5 Democrats. You tell me who's shutting the government down. And Mr. President, I think that the public is coming wise to this debate and this argument and these fallacious arguments that are being made by the Democrats. In fact, there's a new Harvard-Harris poll that came out Monday that found that 70% of voters oppose the government shutdown. 70%. And of interest to my Democrat colleagues, 65% of voters, including 63% of independents, think Democrats should end the shutdown by accepting a continuing resolution like the clean funding resolution I just described that's in front of us. So what are my Democrat colleagues doing? Well, after their resounding defeat in the presidential election last November, you'd think they might be paying attention to the strong majority of voters who would like the shutdown to end as well. Now, you'd think they might notice that 63% of independents, voters I'm sure Democrats would like to capture in the next election, want Democrats to accept a resolution like the clean CR in front of us. But you'd be wrong. Because, Mr. President, Democrats are still deeply enthralled to the far left. And they're taking their marching orders for this shutdown from far-left interest groups. And I mean that literally. A recent Axios article reported, and I quote, "Progressive grassroots groups are blasting congressional Democrats on speed dial to hold the line in any negotiations to reopen the government," end quote. Now that followed an Axios report that found, and I quote again, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and his staff are closely coordinating their government shutdown strategy with outside liberal groups. Backing down and helping fund the government like Schumer did in March is unacceptable, the groups have told his team, end quote. Backing down and helping fund the government like Schumer did in March is unacceptable, the groups have told his team, end quote. And so the liberal groups say, jump, and Democrat leaders say, how high? Forget the robust majority of independents who want Democrats to end this shutdown. You know, Mr. President, back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean as recently as 6 months ago, the Democrat leader was a pretty passionate opponent of government shutdowns. Yeah, he was an opponent. So much so that even though he didn't like the continuing resolution we passed in the spring, he voted for it anyway because in his words, and again I quote, a government shutdown would be far worse, end quote. But then progressive groups got big time mad. And now the Democrat leader is leading the charge to keep the government shut down indefinitely, apparently. And all those federal workers and hardworking Americans he was so worried about before seem to have just slipped his mind. In fact, Democrats have barely reacted to the fact that federal workers are going to start missing pay. Mr. President, when we realized that we were going to need a continuing resolution to allow us more time to complete the fiscal year 2026 appropriations bills, Republicans wanted to do everything we could to ensure that there was no government shutdown, which is why we put forward a clean, continuing resolution with no Republican policies or partisan policy riders. We knew a shutdown would be costly and disruptive for hardworking Americans, and we were determined to ensure the Democrats had no reason to oppose our CR. But Democrats weren't deterred by the fact that there was nothing for them to object to in our bill, and they decided to oppose it anyway. Now, Mr. President, Democrats will get another chance this week to vote to keep the government open. And I hope that the Democrat leader and Democrat senators can summon up some of that concern they used to have about shutdowns and vote to reopen the government. At the very least, if the Democrat leader is too worried about his polling to vote to reopen himself, he could allow Democrat senators who do care about the functioning of our government to join Republicans to reopen. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
It's now been a whole week of Donald Trump's government shutdown, and the country is feeling the sting of Republican intransigence. Over 700,000 federal employees have been furloughed. Services are being disrupted. The Wall Street Journal reported this morning that businesses nationwide with government contracts are in peril. The Republican-manufactured disaster did not need to happen. The government is shut down for one reason, and one reason only. Donald Trump and the Republicans would rather kick 15 million people off health insurance, would rather raise premiums by thousands and thousands of dollars a year on over tens of millions of Americans, rather than sit down and work with Democrats on fixing health care. That's the reason. They'd rather kick tens of millions off health care than sit down with us and work with us on addressing this so important issue, so important to the American people. Now, Americans are frustrated. The cost of living continues to go up. Donald Trump's tariffs have sent grocery prices spiking. It's even more expensive now to buy a cup of coffee. First things many people drink in the morning, they're going to see Trump's tariffs hurting them. People are worried about paying more on their electricity bill. 41 states have seen increased prices. Why? Because in their mania of hating clean energy, they cut out so much of wind and solar being the cheapest form of new energy to go on the grid. Americans are pessimistic that any of this is going to get any better, and they blame President Trump and the Republicans. A CBS poll from a few days ago found that 75% of Americans don't think the Trump administration, is focusing enough on lowering costs. Fixing health care would be at the top of the list for lowering costs for people. Now, Democrats want to reopen the government right away. We want to have a serious negotiation to fix health care so that people can see their costs go down. And we can do both. Fix health care and reopen the government. This is not an either-or thing, which Republicans are making it. The American people don't like it. Democrats have been consistent. Our position remains the same. We've been saying it for months. Republicans are shutting down the government because they refuse to address the crisis in American health care. One sentence sums it all up. Republicans are shutting down the government because they refuse to fix and address the crisis in American health care. Now, our Republican colleagues, being against public sentiment, are flailing. On the one hand, it's starting to sink in for Republicans that their position of not fixing health care is untenable in the eyes of the American people. As President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. Well, public sentiment is building on fixing health care. It's high already. It's getting higher every day. And it's not going to recede. It's getting even stronger. Republicans refuse to acknowledge that public sentiment is not on the side of Trump and Johnson. And Johnson has become the #1 roadblock to ending a shutdown. He sent everyone home for 3 weeks now. If you care about fixing the crisis, if you care about reopening the government, how the hell do you keep your House not in session for 3 weeks? And now but even so, Johnson himself is feeling the heat. At first, he and his caucus were telling Republicans in the House, don't talk about health care. They knew the American people were against what they thought. Johnson's leadership team explicitly told members in a memo not to mention health care when talking about the shutdown. Of course, that didn't work, because the public knows overwhelmingly that we need lower health care premiums, and that's what Democrats are fighting for, and that's what's preventing the Republicans from coming to the table. They don't want to fix it. That's why they're causing the shutdown. So, feeling the heat, Speaker Johnson held a press conference yesterday and said perhaps one of the most ridiculous things I've heard from Republicans in a long time. He said, "Look me right under the camera," said Johnson, I'll tell you very clearly, Republicans are the ones concerned about health care. As he did it, he couldn't look right into the camera. Deep in his subconscious, he knew he wasn't telling the truth. What he said was nonsense. He couldn't even look in the camera when he said this, because he knows the American people don't buy what he's saying. Republicans are the ones who cut $1 trillion from Medicaid, who tried to repeal the ACA. 3 times we asked them to vote to sustain it after the new year. 3 times they voted it down. So that's first. And second, Donald Trump is making all these terrible threats led by the evil Mr. Vote. Trump is saying he's going to fire people en masse, saying that federal workers don't even deserve back pay, even though he signed the law guaranteeing back pay in 2019. Again, they're threatening, they're bludgeoning, they're using the American people, government workers, as pawns. But these kind of tactics from the administration are backfiring. Americans don't like being used as pawns, even if they're not one subject to being held hostage. They don't like watching it happen. And the American people know clearly that it's Republicans who are in charge. Republicans have the White House. They control the House and the Senate. So when people are laid off, when people are not paid, when people are not getting back pay, they know it's the Republicans trying to do it, even though they're using it to try and bully us. It's not Democrats who are threatening to fire people or threatening to withhold back pay. It's the Republican side, Donald Trump, saying all of this, and the American people know it and will blame them for these mass firings and chaos. The data is very clear that trying to use the public as political pawns will backfire for Republicans. And plenty of Republicans in Congress know this. That's why behind closed doors, some Republicans are praying the administration tones down its threats. because these mean-spirited tactics by Russell Vogt aren't going to win in the court of public opinion or in the hearts and minds of Americans. Look, Republicans are tripping over themselves because they're divided on the core issue, fixing people's health care. When someone on the hard right, the hard right, Marjorie Taylor Greene, openly says Republican leaders are wrong and that we need to fix the premiums, that's how you know how deeply Republicans are split. Let me read what she said. Quote, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, not Chuck Schumer. I'm going to go against everyone on this issue, health care that is, because when tax credits expire this year, my own adult children's insurance premiums for 2026 are going to double, along with all the wonderful families and hardworking people in my district. More Republicans should listen to her, because on this issue, she's right on the money. Meanwhile, Democrats' position hasn't changed. We urge our Republican colleagues to join us in a serious negotiation to reopen the government and extend ACA premiums. It's the right thing to do for the American people, and by doing it, we'll be able to quickly reopen the government before any more serious damage is done by the Republicans to our country. And finally, on nominations, Mr. President, today the Senate will vote to advance the nomination of Jennifer Mascott of Maryland to be a circuit court judge for the Third Circuit. I'll oppose Mascott's nomination because she does not seem to have any other qualification for the job other than this. She's a career loyalist, a sycophant to Donald Trump. She has no connections to the Third Circuit. She's never lived in Delaware. She's not even licensed to practice law in Delaware. In fact, her only link to the state is a beachside summer home. If you look at Mascott's resume, the only time she's ever really practiced law is the 2 years she worked in the Trump's Department of Justice. That's it. And you're putting her on the circuit court, one of the most important courts in the country? Well, the only reason Donald Trump's putting Mascott on the bench is because he thinks she will do whatever he wants from the bench. She'll be a total Trump sycophant. Not look at the law, not look at the facts, just look at Donald Trump and see which way he's nodding and follow it. This nominee is another Trump example. It's another troubling example of the Trumpification of the federal bench, where loyalists replace jurists and obeisance to Trump matters more than adherence to the law or precedent or even the Constitution. It's just like what we saw yesterday in the Judiciary Committee. Pam Bondi exposed herself as woefully unqualified to be Attorney General, but a supremely obeisant Trump deputy is what she is instead. She spent her time dodging questions, hurling insults, and, most importantly for Donald Trump, defending the president's interests more than anything else, even if the law or the facts or the truth pointed strongly in the other direction. This troubling pattern of obeisance, above all, in our judiciary system is dangerous, troubling. So I will oppose today's nominee and urge my colleagues to do the same. Yield the floor.